All right, welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive?
Absolutely. Always ready to dig into the latest cybersecurity happenings.
Well, this week, let's just say it's been a busy one. We've got a whole stack of news articles and reports, and some of them, well, let's just say they're pretty eye-opening.
Definitely some themes emerging that really highlight the evolving landscape of cyber threats.
So let's jump right in. I think the one that really caught my attention was all these attacks on industrial control systems, ICS. I mean, we're talking power grids, water treatment plants, the stuff that keeps society running.
Yeah, and what's really concerning is a report from SANS that Dark Reading highlighted showed that nearly 75% of attacks on these systems, they weren't even ransomware.
So not even about the money. That's kind of scary.
Right. It seems to be more about disruption and sabotage, causing chaos.
So like just wreaking havoc for the sake of it.
It seems that way, yeah. And what's even more concerning is how they're doing it. Not some super sophisticated, zero-day exploits. They're exploiting basic IT vulnerabilities. Like what kind of vulnerabilities?
Think weak passwords on employee workstations, unpatched software, even compromised devices in the supply chain.
So it's almost like leaving the back door wide open and then being surprised when someone walks in.
Yeah, pretty much. And here's the thing. This should matter to everyone, even if you don't work in a power plant or a water treatment facility, because these attacks can have huge ripple effects. Think hospitals, financial institutions, just everyday life if the power grid goes down.
Right, like it's all connected when one part fails.
Exactly. It can impact us all.
All right, well, speaking of things that can impact us all, let's talk about this new ransomware, GoZone. HelpNet Security had a report on it, and the tactics they're using, I mean, they're pretty messed up.
Yeah, this one's a bit different. The ransom demand itself is actually quite low, only $1,000 in Bitcoin. But where it gets really nasty is the psychological manipulation they're using to pressure victims into paying. Yeah, I read about that. They're basically accusing victims of having, like, illegal content on their computers and threatening to report them if they don't pay. I mean, who does that?
It's a new low, even for ransomware gangs. And it really raises some questions about the ethics of paying ransoms. Like, does paying up, even if it's a small amount, just encourage them to use these tactics more?
Yeah, it's a tough situation to be in.
Absolutely. And it really highlights why having strong backups is so important. If you've got your data backed up, you're in a much stronger position to say no to these demands.
Okay, so backups, definitely adding that to my to-do list. But speaking of defenses, let's move on to this massive data breach involving Snowflake. Ars Technica had a piece on this, and it just goes to show how important strong authentication really is.
Yeah, this one's big. Authorities arrested a guy named Alexander Muka, and he allegedly exploited compromised Snowflake accounts to steal data from over 165 organizations. We're talking millions of people impacted here.
Wow, 165 organizations.
Yeah, and here's the thing. He specifically targeted accounts that didn't have multi-factor authentication enabled, basically going for the low-hanging fruit.
So it's almost like, what, leaving your front door unlocked and then wondering how the burglar got in?
Pretty much. And this case is just a reminder that multi-factor authentication is non-negotiable these days. It's a must-have for any online account that has sensitive information.
Right. Definitely worth taking the extra minute to set it up. But this Snowflake incident, it actually speaks to a broader trend, and that's identity-related breaches, which are hitting businesses hard and they're getting expensive.
Yeah. The numbers are pretty staggering. HelpNet Security reported 66% of organizations hit by identity breaches suffered some kind of significant impact. Almost half of those estimated the costs were actually higher than your standard data breach.
So not only are they becoming more common, they're becoming more costly too. So what's driving this trend? Why are these attacks on the rise?
Well, a few things. First, the criminals are getting more sophisticated. They're using AI to automate their attacks, analyze huge data sets to find vulnerabilities, and they're getting really good at social engineering, tricking people into handing over their credentials.
So it's not just about, like, hacking computers anymore. It's about hacking people.
Absolutely, and that's why security awareness training is so important. We need to be aware of the tactics these criminals are using and know how to protect ourselves.
Right. Knowledge is power, especially in this world. Okay, well, speaking of scams and manipulation, this next story is just wild. We're talking about a former bank CEO, Shan Haynes, who embezzled $47 million and then lost it all in a cryptocurrency scam. The Register had the details on this one, and it's like a financial thriller gone wrong.
Yeah, it just shows that anyone can fall victim to these scams, even people in positions of authority who you'd think would know better. And this particular scam, it's called pig butchering.
Pig butchering. I've got to admit, the name alone is pretty disturbing. What is that exactly?
Well, imagine you meet someone online. They're charming, attentive, they build trust over time, they share details about their life, and then they subtly introduce you to this amazing cryptocurrency investment opportunity.
So they're fattening you up with attention and false promises, and
Exactly. Then they go in for the kill. They
Huh.
lure you into investing in this fake platform, often with fake initial profits to make it seem legit. And then one day, poof, the platform and your money, it's all gone.
that's just awful.
Yeah.
And in this case, the consequences were huge, not just for Haynes himself, but for the entire community that relied on that bank.
It's a stark reminder about the risks involved in unregulated crypto markets. You know, the allure of quick riches, it can be blinding, and without proper due diligence, it's easy to fall prey to these scams.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that if something sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Always, always do your research.
Mm.
But on that note, let's move on to some quick updates on vulnerabilities you need to be aware of. Consider this your cybersecurity checklist, fresh from the headlines.
Sounds good to me.
First up, Google Chrome. They released an update, version of 130.32.6723.116.117 for Windows and Mac, and 130.0.6723.116 for Linux, patching two high-severity vulnerabilities, CVE 2024-10826 and CVE 2024-10827. They're what security folks call use-after-free vulnerabilities.
Right, so in plain English, these flaws could basically allow a hacker to run any code they want on your system, hijack your computer, steal your data, install malware, you name it. So if you haven't updated Chrome yet, do it now.
Yeah, no time like the present.
Yeah.
Okay, next on the list, Cisco. They've patched a critical vulnerability, CVE 2024-2418, in their unified industrial wireless software. This one affects certain models of their access points.
And what's scary about this one is that an attacker could potentially take complete control of these devices, we're talking root access, just by sending a few specially crafted commands, no password needed.
So they could take over these access points and wreak havoc on a network.
Exactly. So if you're using any of the affected Cisco devices, update your software immediately. We're talking the Catalyst, IW9165D, IW9165E, or IW9167E access points specifically.
Got it. Cisco, you're on notice. Last but not least, we've got Azure API management. Cybersecurity News reported 3 critical vulnerabilities that could allow attackers to perform server-side request forgery attacks.
Right, so these flaws could let attackers trick a server into making requests to other systems that it shouldn't have access to. They could even upload malicious files.
So it's like using a trusted employee to unknowingly smuggle contraband into a secure facility.
A great analogy. And these attacks could give them access to internal Azure assets, potentially even allowing them to execute code, giving them a foothold within the system.
Not good. So what can people do?
Well, Microsoft has released updates to address these vulnerabilities. So, first things first, apply those patches ASAP. And while you're at it, take a look at your APM configurations. Just make sure everything is locked down tight.
Okay, good advice. Now, before we get into even more vulnerabilities, let's shift gears for a moment and talk about something positive. Because it's not all doom and gloom in the world of cybersecurity, right? There are people out there fighting back.
Absolutely. It's important to remember that. And the Hacker News had a great report on Interpol's Operation Synergia II, which was this huge international crackdown on cybercrime.
This operation, it ran from April to August this year and resulted in them dismantling over 22,000 malicious servers that were involved in a whole range of cybercrime. Phishing, ransomware, data theft, you name it.
It was a truly global effort with law enforcement from dozens of countries. They worked with private sector partners, too, like Group IB and Kaspersky, who provided a lot of intelligence and expertise.
Wow, so a really big win for the good guys.
Definitely. It just goes to show what can be accomplished when everyone works together.
But even with these wins, I think it's important to stay realistic, because recent events show that no one is immune. Anyone can be a target. InfoSecurity magazine had a report on a cyber attack that hit Microlise, a telematics provider that works with some big names like DHL and Serco.
Yeah, and this attack caused major disruptions to their tracking services. It just goes to show how interconnected everything is. One cyber attack can have ripple effects that impact everyone.
And this one had some real-world consequences. The attack actually disabled tracking and panic alarms in Serco's prison transport vehicles, so they had to resort to alternative safety measures. It really highlights how these attacks, they're not just about data breaches and stolen credit card numbers.
Exactly. They can have real-world impacts on public safety, business operations, even critical infrastructure. It's something we all need to be aware of.
Yeah, definitely food for thought. Well, that's about all the time we have for part 1 of this deep dive. But don't worry, we'll be back with more insights, analysis, and actionable advice in part 2. Stay tuned. Welcome back to our deep dive on all things cybersecurity. Last time, we were talking about how anyone can be a target, and it really got me thinking about the role of artificial intelligence in all this. AI seems to be a game changer in cybersecurity, right?
Yeah, it's like AI is becoming this double-edged sword. On one side, you've got the attackers using it to make their attacks more efficient and harder to detect and, well, frankly, more successful.
So instead of some lone hacker, we're talking AI-powered systems that can, scan for vulnerabilities, write phishing emails, even create malware.
Exactly. Think of an AI system that can analyze, huge data sets of stolen passwords and then use that information to create super convincing phishing emails that are tailored to each individual target.
That's pretty terrifying, using AI to exploit human weaknesses like that at scale.
Yeah, it's definitely upping the ante. But here's the good news. The good guys, the cybersecurity community, they're using AI to fight back too.
So it's not all bad.
No, not at all. Security teams are using AI to analyze network traffic, looking for those subtle patterns that might indicate an attack. They're also using it to automate tasks like threat detection and incident response.
So it's like having an AI bodyguard constantly scanning for threats and alerting you if something's off.
Yeah, pretty much. But even with all this fancy AI tech, there's another really important part of cybersecurity that we need to talk about, and that's transparency. Transparency and accountability.
Right, because we see all these data breaches in the news, and it often feels like companies are trying to just sweep it all under the rug.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I mean, companies might be hesitant to disclose breaches because they're worried about reputational damage, or legal consequences.
I get that, but it seems like hiding a breach just makes things worse in the long run, right? It prevents people from taking steps to protect themselves, and it erodes trust.
Absolutely. Transparency is key. It allows individuals to take action, change passwords, monitor their accounts if their data has been compromised, and it holds companies accountable for their security practices.
So how do we encourage more transparency when it comes to data breaches? What needs to happen?
Well, I think we need to create a culture where companies are rewarded, not punished, for promptly disclosing breaches. It should be seen as a responsible thing to do, not a sign of weakness.
Yeah, makes sense. Shift the focus from blame and shame to learning and improvement.
Exactly. We need clear guidelines for breach disclosure, making sure people are notified quickly and that companies actually take steps to prevent these things from happening again. But, while we're talking about practical steps, let's get down to the basics. What can everyday people do to protect themselves online? What are the essentials?
Yeah, great point. It's easy to get lost in all the technical details, so let's break it down. What are the must-dos for online safety?
Well, let's start with the most basic, but still super important passwords. Strong, unique passwords are your first line of defense.
Okay, so remind us, what makes a password strong?
Think at least 12 characters, a mix of uppercase, lowercase, numbers, symbols. Avoid using anything easily guessable, like your birthday or your pet's name. And for goodness sake, use a different password for every single online account.
Yeah, that's always the hard part, remembering all those passwords.
I know, right? That's where a password manager comes in. Generates and stores all your passwords securely, so you only have to remember one master password. Seriously, it's a game changer.
Okay, password manager, got it. What about multi-factor authentication, MFA? That seems to be everywhere these days.
For good reason. It's that extra layer of security requiring you to provide 2 or more forms of identification before you can access an account.
So it's like having a double lock in your front door.
Exactly. Even if someone gets your password, they can't get in without that second factor, like a code sent to your phone or a fingerprint scan. And most online services offer it these days. It takes, 2 minutes to set up?
Right, no excuses. Passwords, MFA, check. What about email security? Those phishing scams, they seem to be getting sneakier and sneakier.
Yeah, they're definitely getting better. But you can still spot them if you know what to look for. Just be suspicious of any email that seems off, especially ones pushing you to click a link, download an attachment, or provide personal information.
So no clicking on that "you've won $1 million" email.
Definitely not. Check the sender's email address. Does it look legit? Hover over links before you click them, see where they actually lead. Never open attachments from someone you don't know. And if you have any doubts at all, contact the organization directly.
Good advice. Okay, what about software updates? Are those really that important? I'll admit, sometimes I tend to ignore them.
Don't ignore them. They're essential. Those updates often include security patches that fix known vulnerabilities, the exact holes attackers are trying to exploit.
So if I'm procrastinating on updates, I'm basically making life easier for the hackers.
You're rolling out the red carpet. Enable automatic updates whenever you can, and make it a habit to check for updates regularly, especially for your operating system, browser, and security software.
Okay, adding software updates to my to-do list. Now, what about all those apps we download on our phones and computers? Anything we should be wary of there?
Definitely. Stick to official app stores like Google Play or the Apple App Store. Read the reviews before you download anything. And be cautious about giving apps access to your contacts, location, camera, microphone. Unless it's really necessary for the app to function, don't give them permission.
So, trust but verify kind of approach.
Exactly. And avoid downloading software from those shady websites. You never know what you might be getting. And while we're talking about being cautious, let's talk about social media. Great way to connect with people, but it can also be a minefield of scams and misinformation.
Yeah, definitely a double-edged sword.
Be mindful of what you share online. Think about it. Do you really want your whole life story publicly available? Be careful about friend requests from people you don't know, and be wary of anything that sounds too good to be true, like those get-rich-quick schemes or miracle cures.
So common sense goes a long way. Don't believe everything you see online.
Exactly. And speaking of things you might see online, let's talk about public Wi-Fi. Super convenient, but often unsecured, meaning someone could be snooping on your data.
So avoid online banking or shopping while I'm sipping my latte at the coffee shop.
Best to be safe. If you have to use public Wi-Fi, consider using a VPN, a virtual private network. It encrypts your connection and makes it harder for anyone to snoop.
Okay, VPN, got it. Now, there's one more thing that I know is important, but I'll admit I always seem to forget about it, and that's backups.
Backups, they're your safety net. They can save you in so many situations, whether it's a ransomware attack, hard drive failure, even just accidentally deleting a file.
Yeah, I know I should be doing it more regularly. Convince me. Why are backups so essential?
Okay, picture this. Your computer crashes, all your photos, documents, work files gone. Or you get hit by ransomware and your files are held hostage. A recent backup can literally be the difference between losing everything and getting back on track quickly.
Okay, you've convinced me. Backups are moving to the top of my to-do list. But cybersecurity, it's not just about checking boxes, right? It's a mindset, a way of thinking.
You got it. It's an ongoing process, not a one-time fix. Stay informed about the latest threats, keep your software updated, and be vigilant about your online habits.
So it's like brushing your teeth for the internet.
Yeah.
A daily habit.
Exactly. Make cybersecurity part of your routine. But before we wrap up, there's another crucial element we need to address, and that's the human factor.
Right, because we've talked a lot about technology, but at the end of the day, it's people making the decisions that can either strengthen or weaken a system's security.
It's true. We're both the strongest and the weakest link. Think about it. Social engineering attacks, they work because they exploit human emotions. Fear, greed, curiosity.
So it's not just about having the best software, it's about understanding human behavior and how that impacts security.
Exactly. It's about educating people, raising awareness, and creating a culture of security where everyone feels responsible for keeping things safe.
Right. It's a shared responsibility, not just the IT department's problem.
Absolutely. We need to empower people to make smart decisions, spot suspicious activity, and speak up if they see something that seems off.
So how do we build that culture? How do we make security awareness more than just a bunch of boring lectures?
Well, it starts with education and training, but you're right, it can't just be lectures. Make it engaging, interactive, hands-on, and tailor it to different roles within an organization. And it needs to be ongoing. Keep people updated on the latest threats and best practices.
So it's like a cybersecurity gym membership. You've got to keep working at it to stay in shape.
I like that. Now think about your own role in all this. How can you be more proactive about cybersecurity, both personally and professionally? What can you do differently?
That's a great question to consider. It's easy to feel overwhelmed by all the threats out there, but we can each make a difference. Start by taking those simple steps to protect yourself and your organization.
Small changes can have a big impact. So educate yourself, stay vigilant, and don't be afraid to speak up if you see something that seems fishy.
Great advice. Well, that brings us to the end of part 2 of our cybersecurity deep dive. But don't worry, there's more to come.
Join us for part 3, where we'll explore this whole idea of cyber resilience and talk about building a more secure and resilient digital world. Until then, stay safe out there.
Welcome back, everyone, for the final part of our cybersecurity deep dive. Phew, we've covered a lot of ground, right? From AI-powered attacks to the good old-fashioned password advice.
We have, but I think there's one concept that really ties it all together, and that's cyber resilience. It's not just about blocking every single attack, right? It's about being prepared to withstand the attacks that do get through and bouncing back stronger.
So it's like having a backup plan, or maybe like a whole bunch of backup plans.
Yeah, more like having a whole alphabet of plans. Cyber resilience is this really comprehensive approach. It includes everything, robust backups, incident response plans, employee training, strong communication channels, the works.
Oh, that sounds pretty intense. For organizations that are just, starting to think about this whole cyber resilience thing, where do they even begin?
Well, the first step is understanding what you're up against. What are the most critical assets to your organization? What are the threats that you're most likely to face? And then what would the impact be if an attack was successful?
So like a self-assessment. Figure out where you're strong, where you're weak, and where you're most vulnerable.
Exactly. Once you have a really clear understanding of the risks you face, you can start making plans to address those risks. That's where things like, incident response planning, business continuity planning, disaster recovery planning all come in.
Okay. I hear those terms all the time, but I'm not always sure what they actually mean in practice. Can you break those down for us?
Sure. Think of incident response planning like your playbook for handling a cyber attack. It lays out all the steps you need to take to contain the damage, investigate what happened, and then recover your systems.
So like a fire drill, but for cybersecurity.
Exactly. Business continuity planning is more about keeping those essential business functions up and running, even if there's a disruption. So that might mean having redundant systems, backup power supplies, alternative work locations, things like that.
So you don't want your whole business to just completely shut down because of an attack.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then you've got disaster recovery planning, which is all about getting your systems and your data back online after a major incident. So that includes having backups, restoring that data, and then testing those recovery procedures beforehand.
So it's all about minimizing the downtime and getting back to business as usual as quickly as possible.
Right. But let's not forget about communication. You need to be able to talk to your employees, customers, partners, even the public if there's a cyber incident. That communication is critical.
Yeah, it's like that saying, honesty is the best policy. Being transparent about what happened and what you're doing to fix it can help build trust and minimize the damage.
For sure. And, another thing that often gets overlooked, practice. Regular testing and exercises are so important to make sure that those cyber resilience plans actually work. You don't want to wait until there's a real attack to find out your plan has a bunch of holes in it or that your team doesn't know what to do.
Right. It's like practicing that escape route from your house, just in case there's a fire. Better to be prepared.
Exactly. Testing helps make sure everyone knows what they're supposed to be doing and that the plans actually work. And that brings us back to the human element. Cyber resilience, it's not just about technology and processes, it's about people.
It always seems to come back to the idea that we're both the strongest and the weakest link in the chain.
It's true. We need to create this culture of security awareness where everybody understands how important cybersecurity is, and feels empowered to report something suspicious or potential threats. It can't just be on the IT department's shoulders.
Everyone needs to be on the same team working together.
Exactly. Cyber resilience, it's a team sport, you know what I mean? It takes commitment from everybody, all the way from the CEO down to the intern. Everyone has a role to play.
So it sounds like cyber resilience is kind of like a puzzle, all these different pieces. Technology, processes, people, the whole culture. And they all have to fit together.
A great analogy. And as the world becomes even more connected than it already is, this is only going to become more important. It's not really a question of if an attack will happen, but when. And it's the organizations that have built up that resilience that are going to be best prepared to weather the storm, They're the ones who are going to come out on top.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one key thing you want our listeners to take away from all this?
Cybersecurity is everyone's responsibility. It's about taking those steps, those proactive steps to protect yourself, protect your data, protect your organization. It's about staying informed, staying vigilant, and, just being prepared.
It's about recognizing that in today's world, we're all in this together, whether we like it or not.
We are. Cybersecurity is a shared responsibility. If we work together, we can create a more secure digital future for everyone.
Well said. thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We hope you found it insightful and maybe even a little bit motivating to take your cybersecurity game to the next level. Until next time, stay safe out there.